Ariana Grande was particularly impressive to me and is probably the biggest standout of the film, in my opinion. I was just really impressed by not only her singing, of course, but I was just really impressed by her comedic chops in this movie. And much of the film's comedy is coming from her, and she has great comedic timing. And she brings a lot of comedic physicality to it. There's some wonderful, like, fun sight gags with her that really work, especially stuff with her hair. And yeah, she felt a little bit like Rachel McAdams from Mean Girls, or Regina George. Maybe not as mean, but they share some similar traits, being, you know, the very popular girl at high school. In this case, this, you know, magical academy. But, you know, there's, you know, some warmth from her. She does have a heart, and we see that in the film. But I found her really, really funny throughout the entire film, and she ended up being probably like my favorite character in the movie. So let's go ahead and move on to my review for Wicked, a film that I went into relatively blind. While I did, of course, grow up with watching, you know, The Wizard of Oz for years, watched that probably at least 24 times between the ages of 5 and 10 years old, and I recently rewatched it again, and just in preparation for Wicked, and the movie is still an all-time classic, by the way. I had just, you know, overall much less experience with Wicked than probably a lot of people going into this movie. Of course, I knew it was based on a book from the 90s, of course, also called Wicked, that was later transformed into a very popular Broadway show, but, you know, I had not read the book. I had not seen the show or heard a lot of the music. I guess I heard a handful of the songs, bits and pieces over the years, but really that's about it, you know. And I thought the marketing for the movie was just okay. You know, I thought like every trailer they released after the first one was a little bit better, but then the first one was like, I wasn't really sure. And then you just had the Cynthia Erivo controversy for attacking that fan because of a innocent fan poster that was actually better than the marketing materials that they were, you know, actually showcasing. In any case, you know, that was just my experience leading up to the release of the movie. And I gotta say, despite, you know, me not knowing too much about it, me not being overly impressed by a lot of the marketing, you know, materials, I wound up really enjoying this film. Now, this is just part one of the Wicked story. They haven't really been emphasizing that in any of the marketing, because I think a lot of people are just sick of, you know, part one of however many films. So it's just Wicked. But this is very much part one of the Wicked story, and they were smart not to emphasize that with a lot of people just sick of Hollywood's obsession with splitting single stories into multiple parts just to, you know, eke out even more money. But thankfully, splitting this story, it didn't feel, at least to me, that I was like missing out on the entire story. It felt like it ended in a good place and sets up the sequel quite well. However, before getting into the nitty-gritty details, I do want to give you the overall story. You know, the story follows a young girl named Elphaba, hope I'm saying that correctly, who is misunderstood and ridiculed due to her green skin. You know, she later forms a deep and loving friendship with Glinda, this young girl at a prestigious academy in Oz. And she, you know, yearns to meet the famed and fabled, you know, Wizard of Oz, who she thinks will just solve all of her problems. But she comes to learn a horrible secret, a horrible truth that puts her on the path to become the supposedly infamous Wicked Witch of the West. One thing that I was initially concerned about was that the film would just be filled with CGI muck, mumbo jumbo the entire time. And while there is certainly a lot of CGI in the movie, I do appreciate that the film production and the production design and that they emphasize like a use of practical effects. You know, Chu and his team, John M. Chu is the director of the movie, they do a great job of having just Oz feel real at times. And the different locations and designs for those locations were very evocative of the 1939 film and its overall aesthetic, which is very hard to capture. You know, the costumes, I think, are also like really good. They're great throughout the movie, with each character having a very specific look and color associated with them, and that definitely made them pop and stand out in all the scenes that they were obviously featured in. And just speaking of the characters, I think the cast does a really great job in the film. Aside from the supporting cast of Michelle Yeoh, Peter Dinklage, and Jeff Goldblum, I wasn't too familiar with the film's leads of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. I know they're very popular for the music and the stuff that they've, done for the stage, certainly in the case of Erivo. But my only real exposure to them was, I guess, seeing Grande in her very small role in the movie Don't Look Up, where, she was actually pretty funny in that film. I dug her, but that's pretty much my only exposure to her. And then Erivo in the live-action remake of Disney's Pinocchio. Not a great movie. One of the worst movies of that particular year. But all that aside, they both do a great job in this film. And, as someone who is more used to Margaret Hamilton's performance of the Wicked Witch in the original movie, which is a very broad and loud performance, which is a compliment, by the way. Her playing it that way, the way she did, made that character just a legendary villain in cinema. Plus, there's just so many funny moments where she could watch the movie, especially when she's talking to her flying monkeys and overlooking her crystal ball, and she's coming up with all these evil machinations. She could just literally turn to her evil monkey lieutenant and just tell him to do this, but she just has to wrap around her throne and then confront him like this. It's why do you have to do that? She's extra, but I love that about her because she's so crazy and over the top. That's what made her character, her take on the Wicked Witch, so incredibly iconic and is now one of the most beloved on-screen villains of all time. But Erivo, she opts for a more reserved performance, I would say, at first. We see her childhood, how she came to be, green everything, how she was ostracized, which, I have to say, the Wonderful World of Oz, it's filled with all sorts of goofy characters and talking animals and people in ridiculous outfits and various skin tones. The fact that you just have so many people that are just oh my God, you're green. It's really? That's the thing that set everybody off, is the fact she's green. Have you seen what you're wearing? It looks ridiculous. But I guess, the whole movie, the much like the original novel and the Broadway show, it's a critique on racism, shows just how ridiculous it obviously, is, just because you're judging someone and everything about them, the moral of their character, the way they think, just because they happen to have a different skin tone than you, a different skin color. It's obviously, ridiculous. And I get that. That's the movie's point. But it's just crazy that all these, magic, characters who look ridiculous have a problem with the fact that she's green. Any case, because of that, she's just kind of grown up ostracized, hated by her father, tolerated by her sister throughout the movie, and it tolerated or just, despised by many other people. A couple exceptions, and we see more of that, throughout the film. But she's developed a very guarded personality, one that's a little sassy, one that's a little sarcastic, but most of the time, very stoic, because she's constantly trying to protect herself. And I think she does a good job with that. I guess, personally expecting just kind of like a bit of Margaret Hamilton, just, really big, broad, and just loud and stuff like that, which she definitely gets more like that towards the end of the film, which, obviously setting up, part two of her being the Wicked Witch, or at least, this world's version, this take on the Wicked Witch, of course. But don't go in thinking you're going to see this huge, big, broad performance. However, she does a really good job. Obviously her singing skills are on full display. I mean, she gets, one of the best songs from the original musical Defying Gravity, and she knocks it out of the park. She does a great job. That entire sequence with her is just, beautiful to behold. Ariana Grande was particularly impressive to me, and is probably the biggest standout of the film, in my opinion. I was just really impressed by not only her singing, of course, but I was just really impressed by her comedic chops in this movie. And much of the film's comedy is coming from her, and she has great comedic timing. And she brings a lot of comedic physicality to it. There's some wonderful, fun sight gags with her that really work, especially stuff with her hair. And yeah, she felt a little bit like Rachel McAdams from Mean Girls, or Regina George. Maybe not as mean, but they share some similar traits, being the very popular girl at high school, in this case this magical academy. But there's some warmth from her. She does have a heart, and we see that in the film. But I found her really, really funny throughout the entire film, and she ended up being probably like my favorite character in the movie. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do with her, obviously in part two, and also see her pop up in some other stuff. Just yeah, overall, I really liked her. But then of course you have some other people that I even neglected to mention. One person, Jonathan Bailey, who I'm unfamiliar with, he plays this character named Ferio. I think it's Ferio. Fifi, he comes from Winky Country, and he's like, he's the cool dude that comes to school. He's like, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. But then he meets Elphaba. He's like, hey, girl. And I liked him. He has a great musical number in the movie. He has a lot of charisma, great interactions with both Ariana Grande and Arrivo, and I neglected to mention him at the top. I also thought he was quite good. I'm very interested to see what kind of role he's going to play in part two, because they set him up to be, you think of him as this one kind of person, this very shallow kind of guy, but he's more than that, and so I'm excited to see where they take his character. But then in terms of the people that I mentioned, more of the veteran actors in this movie, Michelle Yeoh, who plays Madame Morble, who's the dean of this kind of prestigious school in Oz. Kind of like Hogwarts before Hogwarts in a way. They call it Shiz, the Shiz University, which I thought was a very funny name for a university. She's great. I mean, it's Michelle Yeoh. She's a veteran actor. She knows what she's doing. She gets a little, song and dance stuff, but she brings such a great presence to this movie, very, commanding presence. And I don't want to say too much about her character, obviously, and what she does and what she turns into, but really, really liked her quite a bit. And I obviously can't wait to see her in part two. Peter Dinklage, surprisingly not playing a munchkin, which you see him in the credits. I'm like, okay, I don't. That's the other thing too. It's like, you have like all these people from Munchkin lands, but like none of them are like little people. They're not, midgets or dwarves or stuff. They're just kind of like regular looking, just tall people. So I was like, that's kind of weird, but I don't know, whatever. Maybe that's just the name for their piece of land, their county in Oz, for all I know. But he does not play Munchkin in the movie, and that would have been kind of perfect. He actually voices this goat professor, Dr. Dillamond, in the film, and he's kind of like in the first half of the movie, and I really like what they do with him. You really come to care about his character, and also just a lot of the CGI talking animals of Oz. I think a lot of us are just kind of tired of, but believe me, I recently just watched Gladiator 2, where I had to deal with a ton of CGI animals that all looked like shit, from these the CGI evil muty baboons, monkey things, to CGI sharks with frickin' laser beams on their frickin' heads, to like a CGI rhino straight out of Wakanda Forever. These CGI animals are a lot better looking. They're a lot more wholesome. They do a lot more interesting things with them. And it all is kind of comes together with Peter Dinklage's character, who establishes a bit of a bond with Elphaba in the movie. She really cares for the talking animals of Oz, and who are kind of undergoing this really tumultuous period right now, which has them very frightened, very scared. But I liked his role in the movie, and I thought he did a good job voice acting the character. And the one person who I was already excited about when they first announced him when he was cast as this particular character, I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's who I want to cast if I was going to do another Wizard of Oz movie. And that, of course, is Jeff Goldblum as the wonderful Wizard of Oz, and he is absolutely perfect in the movie. he is great. He's bringing all the all the Goldblum mannerisms to the Wizard, which is so important, I feel like, because he's a bit odd. He's eccentric. That's what the Wizard. He's a huckster. He's a con man, and Goldblum can play that type of character. He can lay in that charm to it as well. It kind of catches you off guard, even though he's so awkward and so weird. He's really good in the movie, and there's actually just this really cool technical thing that I like with him, where how oftentimes the Wizard presents himself. It's usually through this machine, and it's this giant like hologram basically. And it's giant head, and it's very intimidating with the flames and stuff. They do a bit of that in the movie to pay respect to it, honor it. But they actually kind of change up how he typically presents himself, where it's this giant animatronic head. And it looks really cool. I mean, it's definitely CGI, but I just really dug the look of it. And it's very much like Jeff Goldblum's head. It's his physical features and things, except it's like, it's bronze and stuff. And I just like that detail. I thought it was like very intimidating, especially like it peeking behind the curtain of all these like, strings and ropes, make it like covering up, making it look more nefarious. So really just like that production design detail. And his performance is obviously great throughout the movie, which he comes more into the last third. But obviously setting up to have a much bigger role in part two. And even though it's a pretty long movie, I think it's just under 3 hours. I think it's like 2 hours and 40 minutes or so, nearly 3 hours again. But I never felt bored while watching it. There's always something entertaining, always something very funny, a nice aesthetic thing to appreciate and look at in the film. They don't waste your time. It doesn't. I was worried that this would be very bloated, and the fact they're splitting into 2 parts, I'm like, oh, come on, don't do that. It's gonna drag it out. I didn't feel like I was missing too much. And the film does a number of very fun things in regards to referencing the original musical that I'm kind of a little privy to, that I thought was just a very nice surprise. And I imagine fans of the original Broadway show will just get a really big kick out of that. I'm not going to say what it is, but even I recognize, I'm like, oh, that's pretty fun. I really like that. And it's not just like a one and done. It's a nice little sequence. So that was pretty cool. But, in general, this is a great musical. This is a great fantasy film, and I'm looking forward to part 2 when it eventually releases, which I think is same time next year, 2025, so the week of Thanksgiving, at least towards the end of November. And again, just in time for Thanksgiving again. But yeah, I really like the film. I recommend it. Obviously, if you're already a fan of, I think, of The Wizard of Oz and those original books and different, obviously the seminal film and all the other things that came afterwards. And of course, if you're a huge Wicked fan, if you love the book, if you love the musical, I expect you're gonna love a lot of this, right? And even if you're like me, where you maybe you have some familiarity with Wizard of Oz, you of course grew up watching the original movie. Yeah, give this movie a chance. Give this movie a chance, because I was certainly skeptical before going in. I wasn't really digging a lot of the trailers. I think they could have been better, and he had the controversies and everything like that. I ended up really enjoying the film, so give it a shot if you have some misgivings. But what about you guys? What did you think of Wicked? Wicked Part 1. Well, first of all, did you really like the movie? Were you mixed on it? Did you not like it? And are you looking forward to Wicked Part 2? Can you not wait to see it until next year? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.